Hi everybody. Somebody contacted me quite recently and asked me if I could make a video about free will. So this is what this video's all about. Now, as is always the case in these matters, esoteric matters, it's not just a question of yes or no. Have I got free will or have I not? It's much more complicated than that, and I'll do my best to explain. I've got some notes, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Now, I suppose I better start from the very beginning again for those who don't know what we're talking about. We have a physical body, and we have the real us, which is a spiritual being, an invisible spiritual being that animates the physical body. Now, the essential part of the spiritual part of us is something that we call our higher self. Now, this higher self is actually an aspect of God. And that, in turn, is connected to something that we call an oversoul. Now, if you're not familiar with an oversoul complex, the only way to imagine it is to imagine a queen bee busy producing bees. That's what the oversoul does. Now, in the case of a queen bee, it produces bees to aid the continuance of the race of bees. In the case of an oversoul, its job is to accumulate wisdom, knowledge, wisdom, because that's what God is all about, is accumulating wisdom. So the oversoul, which works very closely with the God complex, is totally occupied with creating beings that can have experience that will be fed back into that oversoul and make the oversoul wiser. So, now, I'll sort of explain it a little bit better as we go down, but imagine that your oversoul decides to create you. You start off as a tiny point of life, which is put inside a kind of an eggshell, which we call the soul, and is given a stamp by the archangels that are known as the directors of life, that you are going to be a human being. As I've said before in other videos, you could be made into anything, but the decision was made a long time ago for you to be made into a human being. Okay, so now you are potentially a human being, but you've got no sort of experience or knowledge or anything. You're just an aspect of life. At that point, you're given into the care of your oversoul. Now, your oversoul creates countless versions of human beings that are related in a way, but not related also any more than a queen bee when she creates all the other bees, the worker bees and the drones and so on. They're related, but then they're not aspects of each other. They're individual little bees. And so that the oversoul that creates you and all the other versions that it creates throughout time, you're all totally separate and different. Now, the oversoul that created you, when it did so, decided that it wanted you to have a certain set of experiences which would enable you to become a wiser person than you were when you started, and feed that wisdom, that knowledge, back into the oversoul, and the oversoul grows because of that. So, the oversoul kind of creates you, okay? In conjunction with these archangelic beings called the directors of life and so on. And gradually you come down through the spheres that we know of as auras. As you do so, you're gradually given information about what your what the aim of your life is going to be, what your oversoul wants you to experience. Then eventually you get to a set of etheric planets that we call the signs of the zodiac, and there you stop, and you're given a particular personality, and at the same time, you, in conjunction with your various guides and helpers and so on, decide which family here on earth would be the best one for you to be born in order for you to have the experience or the experiences that your oversoul wants you to have. So you will be either a man or a woman, or a mixture of both, you know, and you will have a certain skin color, and you will be born in a certain country. You will be born either into a rich family or a poor family, a nice family or a bad family, depending on what your oversoul has decided you need to experience. So, from that aspect, do you have free will? The answer is no. The only free will that you had was when your oversoul created you. You could have told it that you didn't want to come to Earth to have an incarnation here, and you could have either stayed in heaven or to have gone off to another planet to have had an experience in the astral realms around other planets, an other planet. But the fact that you're here demonstrates that you decided to come here, and therefore you had no free will in what you were going to experience. That's why you were born into a particular family, and that you have that were either rich or poor and so on. Now, we come down to the higher self. Now, the higher self, oh, by the way, I forgot to say something, that this knowledge that you were given about what you needed to experience is put, not removed, but put on the back burner of your mind so that you don't remember it, so that it doesn't influence the decisions that you need to take as you go through life here on Earth. But it's retained by your higher self, and your higher self always retains a link to the oversoul. So your higher self sits in the background waiting for you to stumble through life until you either by chance or by luck or by realizing that you need to work with this higher self until you realize that you can use the knowledge that the higher self has to help guide you down the road that you need to take. Okay, now the higher self doesn't force itself on you, it remains in the background. So some people, as we all know, make lots of mistakes as they go through life. But those mistakes will always, first of all, those mistakes are part of life's rich pageant. They're all part of life's experience and are all valuable knowledge and wisdom to the oversoul, even though we consider them to be mistakes. But eventually, imagine that you've got like a Y shape. You've been going down this road, and it's not the right road. You should have gone down this road. Your higher self will at some point say to you, that's enough. You've got to go back to the beginning, and then it will start to guide you down the road you should go. Now, you can already decide to do that if you start to open yourself to allow the higher self to inform you of what you should be doing. And that's usually done through meditation and so on. It doesn't have to be. We all have this small, still voice in the back of our minds that tell us what we should be doing. And most of us don't follow it very much. But if we were to follow that voice, that's the higher self trying to guide us. And if we can follow that, then once again, we don't really have free will, but we are complying with the desires of our oversoul. Now, we do have free will in everyday events. What colour shirt am I going to wear? What am I going to have for lunch? What person What people am I going to choose as friends? What person am I going to marry, and so on? How many children I'm going to have? That sort of thing we have control over. But the broad outlines of the life we need to lead have already been taken, that those decisions have already been taken for us by our oversoul, fed down through into the higher self, which feed them down into us eventually. So I'll stop there. Remember, you've got your oversoul, you've got your higher self, then there's you. And your oversoul decided what it wanted you to experience. It gave that information to your higher self, and that information, that higher self is trying to give you that information, and will do one way or the other. It will only allow you to go down the wrong road so far before it drags you back. And it hopes that, because neither the oversoul nor your higher self wants you to suffer. Believe me, life could be so much easier if we would just listen to our higher self, which is what you're meant to do in the first place. Okay? So, do we have free will or don't we? We do have free will in our day-to-day running of our lives, but we don't have free will over the broad outlines of our life. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope it made sense. It's quite a difficult subject to understand, but I'll stop here. Thank you. I'll speak to you again another day. Bye.